thank you everyone for joining us. We'll do a couple of introductions, and while we're doing that, if everybody wants to put, where you're tuning in from, and also feel free to add your LinkedIn as well if you want to connect with people that are also joining us. We welcome you to do that. So, and like I said, we'll do a couple of introductions, but if you have any questions as well along the way, we welcome you to add those to the comments as well. And I'll try to, all three of us will try to keep an eye on those and answer those as we go through our webinar today. So yes, thank you for joining us. And we've got 3 topics for you as well. But first of all, I'm Jillian Taylor. I'm host for today, customer success strategist. We're going to be talking about career development, but also based on the fact that we've got our 2 authors of the book, Mastering Customer Success here. So that's Peter Armley and Jeff Marr. So I'll let the 2 of them do a quick intro, and then I'll tell you kind of our main topics, and we'll dive into things. So Peter.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I'll speak for Jeff. We're both very excited to be part of this broadcast. I am based in Toronto, a long-time customer success enthusiast, a variety of roles for the last 15 years. But presently I work at ValueWise for the last, I started about 4 months ago, and I'm, as it says on the screen, principal, which means I lead, I'm the lead strategist for the client engagements, but also I'm a public-facing kind of voice for ValueWise and really represent the brand in the market. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Great to have you.
Yeah. So I'm Jeff Marr. I live in Seattle, born and raised, and still graze here in Seattle. I love CS. Absolutely love it. I spent about a decade as an account executive, enterprise account executive. Spent a few years in program management. And I felt like CS was like the perfect fusion of the two. I like sales, but it was hard to do. It's hard to carry the quota for so many years, and CS is like this perfect way I get to, be customer facing still, and still be in this space. So absolutely excited to be here. I'm excited to share about the book and answer any questions. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Great to have you. And I think of it as well for people that are joining us. Feel free to also share with us what role in CS you have, or what brings you to join us today as well. That would be interesting for us to engage. So our 3 topics are kind of the story of how the book Mastering Customer Success came about, and a bit of the evolution and history of Jeff and Peter's CS careers. And then secondly, how to stand out and self-promote as an impactful customer success professional, whatever level that might be, but especially if you're a customer success manager and maybe looking to level up within your organization and your career. And then thirdly, the sort of uncertainty in today's CS landscape, or the future of it, and how it's evolved and changing into the future. So to kick things off, Jeff, would you like to tell us the story of how the project and being an author of the book came to be?
Yeah, the origin story. Thanks, Jillian. I got bit by a spider, and I started to notice weird things, and I ended up writing a book. And it's funny. I got reached out on LinkedIn by a company called Pack Publishing, and the first message, I actually thought it was a scam. I was like, "You want me to write? How much money do you want me to pay you?" and so I started asking some questions. Like, no, seriously, we want you to write a book. And so I said, okay, great. And then we hopped on a call, and I said I need a couple of days to think about it, because I've never done it before. I love CS. I've always thought about sharing kind of my experiences and what I've learned from other great folks, but I ended up saying, absolutely, let's do it. And they said, could you write us an outline? And so I spent a couple weeks, wrote an outline, and then they said, okay, I think we should have a co-author. We have someone in mind. Then that's when they introduced me and brought the wonderful mind, the beautiful mind of Peter and Molly into my life. And it's been amazing ever since. You know, Peter and I really jammed really well, no egos. We just felt like we just wanted to do something great for the community. And I know Peter's been wanting to do this for a while, and I won't steal his story. But, you know, I guess, you know, I always thought, especially in my first CS role at SAP, it was really confusing at first. I got good at my job eventually. But then I started getting pulled in all these directions to take on projects. If you're in CS, you know exactly what I mean, right? There's pilot projects for, you know, piloting Gainsight. You got projects to create new decks and things like that. But I just was like, what do I participate in? What's in my strength zone? What's going to create the biggest impact? What's going to help me stand out the most? And I don't know. I really struggled. I took on projects that didn't go anywhere. Maybe I wasn't really good at, wasn't sure where the direction was. And so I always wanted to build something or create something that maybe gave a little bit more guidance. So I feel like that's kind of where this, at least for me, where it came from. I'll pass it over back to you, Jillian and Peter. So
yeah, Peter, what happened next?
So I guess separately, and I didn't know that was all happening with Jeff and Pact. I didn't realize that they'd reached out to him. They'd reached out to me, I guess, around the same time, maybe a little bit after they reached out to Jeff. And they said, hey, you know, we've been following you for a while, which is always very flattering when they open a spam message that way. But so like Jeff, I thought at first I'd just dismiss it, but they were insistent. And they were pretty descriptive in the way they communicated with me, that they actually pointed out some pieces that I'd written. I thought, okay, they got my attention now. And they said, we would love to talk to you about writing a book about customer success. And our history as a company, as a publishing company, is that we just focus on writing or publishing technical journals, usually like programming languages and how-to manuals. But we think that there's a bright future for our company in expanding into what they call the business realm. And they thought customer success would be a good gateway to that. And that rings true for me, because if you're in customer success and you've been in it for a while, you understand the bridge between technical and strategy. And so that is exactly the way I think about things. And so I said, yeah, I am interested. In fact, in the past, 3 years ago, I already tried to write a book with some other authors that had collapsed for a few reasons. And so I was ready to write a book. And then they described it and they said, oh, by the way, we have an author who's actually we've already been talking with. And that's how we got linked up, Jeff and I, and the rest is history. So we're well on our way to being billionaires selling this. Just kidding.
Yeah, easy. I think this may be jumping ahead a little bit, but one of the things I thought was really cool is, you know, for me, I kind of had imposter syndrome, right? I was thinking, you know, there's so many CSMs out there, like a gajillion of them know, a gajillion of them know a lot more than I do. I didn't mean to do that. Right. And I had this, like, who am I to write a book? Right. And then when they brought in Peter, I was like, okay, now we're talking. We got some credibility. I'm kind of on the front lines. You know, I'm an IC, so I can speak from a perspective of a CSM, right? That's doing it now, and then Peter can speak from someone has, like, one of the folks that probably built the industry, right, and has influenced the industry in so many ways, right, from his talks to webinars and so on and so forth. And so I think meshing the two was just, I don't know, it was felt perfect and unique too. So
yeah, I think that word's right, unique. That's what struck me too, Jeff, is that the combination of your what you're up to now and what I've been up to for the last couple of decades made total sense to me. And you mentioned at the beginning the ego. I've never been a big ego guy. I've loved to help people and the industry, and so I thought this was a good way to share experiences and ideas with people who. With the community of people who are going through really tough times right now, right? So the economy's tough. CS has been particularly hard hit. And I thought this would be a way to kind of refocus people's attention on what really matters, some of the fundamental characteristics of being in customer success and being successful. What are those things? What are those traits and attributes that allow someone to really be successful in the role and to grow despite what's happening in the business world? I'm like Jeff, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think the book's overall message is that if you nail these things, this will serve you well, regardless of the role that you're in.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess maybe now I may as well sort of sound my own horn here, but I also had some involvement in the book. So,
well, let me talk about that.
Okay, I will.
Because I was going to mention that later, but that's fine.
Yeah, well, that's
so
fine.
Jillian Taylor and Maria Jose Villanueva, who's on the call. Actually, I see her in the comments. Hi, Maria. She and Jillian, we recruited them to be technical reviewers. So the big Pact has a big process for publishing books. And that was something really surprising for Jeff and I. Maybe it shouldn't have been. We have no idea. We've never had books published. But all the process that's involved in going from concept to final product is quite complicated. And one of the things they wanted us to do was to recommend people in our community who we trusted, who were experts in the trade too, and could review what we're writing on all the way along the way, and provide feedback, not necessarily from an editorial point of view, but more from a technical. Is this accurate? Is what they're saying sensible? Is it actually something that plays out in real life? All those things. And so Jeff and I were really thrilled and terrified at the same time with the feedback we got. Well, not the feedback. The feedback was excellent, but waiting for the feedback was like, oh my God, what are they going to say now? Because it was all really good stuff. It was all really good critiquing. And I got to tell you, it's amazing that you were on the journey with us all along the way, and you put an effort and time. And so we're really appreciative of that.
Yeah, truthfully, if it was just Peter writing the book, they wouldn't be as necessary. But since I was there, they need to make sure to keep me honest, right? and they definitely did. Absolutely would not have been as accurate if they weren't there. So 100%.
So Jillian, what was the experience like for you?
Well, yeah, I was honored to have you put my name forward. So thank you for that. And it was I enjoy, I guess, editing and read anything about customer success and getting into the details of it. This was a great opportunity for that to be, to leverage that. So that was fun for me. Tight timelines, that's for sure. You guys probably, it was the same. Interesting. Jeff and I had never met. We didn't know each other. I did know, I guess, Jeff, your name, basically, that you were one of the authors. And Peter and I know each other, but at the time, I didn't know when I was reviewing who had written what I was reviewing. I was making some guesses, but so it was very, I'll say unbiased because of those two reasons of not even knowing Jeff at all. And then also at the time, I wasn't 100% sure whose work I was looking at anyways. So there was that aspect of it. So it made it maybe, a little bit easier actually to write the feedback. But yeah, I was wondering that. I thought, oh, this is is this too much feedback? And sometimes in CS, especially some of the content, it can be, some things are subjective too. So I was kind of in my experience, or we all have different experience. So I'm curious. Then you mentioned about based on feedback from MJ and I, were there any pivotal moments in the book's development, whether it was related to feedback that we'd given that kind of changed the flow, or just for other reasons, kind of changes along the way?
I don't think it was, I guess I wouldn't call it a pivot so much as a refinement of our voices. So early on, we had to decide with the publishing, with the editors, what would the voice be like? Would it be like two voices or a single voice? And so we nailed all that down, and came to an agreement that, Jeff would write 5 chapters, I would write 5 chapters, and the editor would make sure that the overall voice was consistent, that the styling would be the same, very similar. And so that was nice that they were able to take care of that and give us guidance on all that. But personally, I think after the first 2 chapters, I got into a bit of a rhythm, and it was a lot of work to write, like many weekends, many hours, many weekends of writing. But I like writing, and the more I relaxed and we got to know our editors, especially one key editor, I understood that the feedback she would provide would be really high value for me. And it's not like I was writing for her, I was still writing for the community. And that's consistent all throughout the book. I was writing for you, all of you in the audience right now. But I have a very personal style of writing too. And she allowed me to kind of exercise that. She would encourage me not just to provide, and the book is littered with personal experiences. So if you haven't read it yet, there's Jeff's personal experiences and my personal experiences, putting in play the stuff we talk about. But she encouraged me to really exercise my personality in the language, in the writing that I put down on paper. So that was great. So that's what I mean by refinement. The book was an evolution for Peter Armley as he's writing it to become, by the final chapter where I wrote about the future, that's all like me just kind of riffing. I mean, with experience and with a lot of deep knowledge about the industry, but it's almost like I'm writing a really strong opinion piece, and I hope it comes across that way, that I'm very sincere about this profession, and that I think there's a bright future for it, but it's going to change, and there's going to be a lot of work that has to be performed in order to get there.
Yeah, Jeff, was there any feedback, like how about for your experience? And anything that kind of shaped, whether maybe it was perspectives that you didn't have before from writing the book that you enhanced?
I think there's a main one. I won't go too long because I know we want to get to the meat of the webinar, but definitely, like like you said, I have all CSMs kind of have their unique lane specific experiences based on the organizations they've been a part of. Some of the feedback that you guys gave was really helpful for me to kind of just open up, peek my head out from the forest and just kind of see more broadly, like how does this pertain to CS in general, and just write with that lens in mind. I think that's really helped. I mean, to my point earlier, it kept me honest, right? And not just sticking to what I knew, but thinking about how it can apply to everybody, right, more broadly. So,
yeah, it's a great combination of your 2 perspectives with, and Peter, you've got a bit of before CS or even during your CS career, a bit of like background in marketing as well, and so so I think that all has an impact on the message.
Let me just make another comment on the feedback from you and MJ. It was really valuable. There were moments in the book when we got the feedback from you where you pushed us to explore a little bit better a particular point. Maybe you wanted us to elaborate a bit more, to flesh it out a little bit more, or to clarify it. And that was really powerful for us to have that objective audience point of view, where when you write something, you think it's clear. It's clear in your mind, obviously, because you're writing it, but maybe it's not being perceived that way. And so having you and MJ as those eyes, and your willingness to kind of just say, hey, this isn't as clear as you might think it is, and it probably requires you to kind of explore a bit more. And it meant more work. Those rewrites that we had to do meant more hours, but I think in the end it was hugely valuable.
Yeah, part of the process. And that the way that we did our critiquing as just for the audience's insight, we had the same set of questions that guided us through our review for each chapter. So chapter by chapter, we, and not necessarily in the order that the chapters appear in the book, but we reviewed based on the same set of questions. And a lot of them were more on the negative side. So I was aware of that. I was thinking, I feel like I need to say something positive because it's good. But the way that the structure and the process is that's how that went. So yeah. Are there any questions from our audience at all? Please feel free to throw in the comments there, and we'll keep an eye out for your questions. I don't think we have any at the moment.
No.
Yeah, I don't see any.
Okay. Well, let's move ahead, and we'll maybe talk about some more experiences related to standing out and self-promoting as a CSM. So maybe Jeff, how about kind of kick off with, are there any strategies that you recommend to professionals looking to transition into customer success, or anyone aiming to advance their careers within the field?
Yeah, all of these things, I think I outlined a lot of it in the book, but I think one of the things that's really crucial is there's a mindset, right? I think for anybody that's read this book, The Strengths Finder, I think you understand what I mean. You guys, silly question. Do you remember going dancing with friends back in the day? You ever had that time?
You're gonna tie this in somehow?
Yeah, I know, it's funny, right? I had a group of friends that we'd go out quite a bit, and back in college, and I always knew which friends they had. Every one of them had their own dance move, right? And you knew once the music got on, and once they found a song they liked, you knew what they're gonna do. It was very predictable. I don't know if I'll give it away what mine was. But you find that in CS, right? Everybody has their own cool dance move. Every CS organization, you know which person to go to when you have a technical issue that you want some technical expertise. You have someone that is a wizard with PowerPoint and building decks. You have someone that's a wizard with data and presenting. You can tell who the next probably CS manager is going to be, right? We all have these people in our organizations. I think one of the best things you can do is lean into that. And that's the thing when I mentioned earlier that when I was at SAP Concur, I was trying to figure out where do I spend my time, and I found leaning into my strengths was huge. Obviously, you want to make sure that I think that the generic answer is make sure you're leaning into aligned with leadership and what's important to your CS organization, how they align to their OKRs with the business, that sort of thing. But I think if you're really wanting to stand out, you got to stick to your cool dance move, right? What your strengths are and play in your lane. I think if you stay there, regardless of what kind of CSM you are, there's a place for each kind of CSM in every organization. There's a need for it, right?
Yeah, I love that, Jeff. That's a really good commentary, and I think that speaks to something we talk about in the book, which is about building credibility. And you have to, it's often said that you have to, if you're aspiring to the next role, you have to actually perform in that role before you get granted promotion to that role. Regardless of what it is, you have to exhibit the behaviors and the qualities and the outcomes, and produce the outcomes to some extent before your leadership will say, okay, you're ready to be promoted. And it might feel unfair, but it's like anything in life. No one's going to take a chance on you necessarily, unless you can show competence, credibility, and also the enthusiasm for it too. So I think the enthusiasm is key. Customer success is there's no shortage of enthusiasm in the profession, as we know. It's really palpable. But I would say, so what Jeff's talking about is the internal, what I call internal, demonstrating competence within your role, within your company, within your organization. There's ways to, if you want to enhance it at an industry level, there's, obviously I'm very vocal out there, but that came after many, many years of work, that kind of work that Jeff's talking about. And so I had the confidence that I could start communicating externally and sharing best practices from my point of view. But I would recommend to people start local, like start volunteering to speak at meetups. They're more like safe zones than jumping on LinkedIn and voicing commentary just because you think you want to develop a brand. The brand's important, but I would also caution people about developing a brand that mimics everyone else. That I don't think that's working anymore, if it ever did. So I think there's more value for people to focus on building credibility from the inside out. So demonstrate that competence in your role, and then start going local meetups, virtual meetups, whatever, and start showing that you have the knowledge and you want to share it. Ultimately, in the end, for me, the people who really are successful at building their brand and customer success are those who come across as authentic, as they're doing it because they want to actually lift up the occupation versus necessarily just themselves.
Yeah. Those are all great insights and advice. I may be curious to know then, given Peter, your extensive network in customer success, are there any trends or strategies that you've noticed are helping professionals stand out and land new opportunities?
So it's hard to say with precision or answer that with precision because things are changing so rapidly. Because you see people like a bit of a flash in the pan, right? They jump on what they think is a trend and they get vocal about it. But I think audiences are wisening up too, and so I think if you want to build sort of long-term credibility, you can't escape the day-to-day rigor of doing the job, of producing results. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to stay in the same company all the time. I encourage people to kind of aspire to be successful in the companies that they think they'll be more successful at. And so the industry is changing all the time. AI, of course, has introduced a huge amount of change in customer success. So I think in terms of trends, Jillian, I think I would encourage people to be open-minded. And so if that, I guess my answer is the trend is to be open-minded about how technology can help you become more effective in your role. It shouldn't be seen as the answer to everything. I think it's like a tool like any other tool. And so I think the trends are, a year ago, the trend was customer success is under extreme microscope from financial organizations to make sure that they're worth the money that they're being invested in. I think it's shifting a bit now because there's been a big shakeout. So I think the trend is back to customer success is moving in the direction better now of being more wedded to the entire go-to-market strategies of companies. And that's a very encouraging sign. So I would encourage customer success people, when I say open-mindedness, I mean broaden the way you think about the customer lifecycle beyond your specific role in customer success, because that's going to change, as the GTM process continues to get refined. More companies are realizing that go-to-market doesn't end at the contract signing. It actually has to extend across the whole life cycle. So customer success and services in general will pick up more prominence and value for companies. And so that's where I go back to the open-mindedness. Be ready to exhibit those qualities of focusing on the customer, delivering results, because that'll pay dividends in another year or two, I think.
Yeah, that's solid advice there. And it's definitely being in tune with the entire company's business. So whether like from the product and customer standpoint, and also just the industry and the go-to-market, we're part of that whole picture. So
it's not easy. If no one's saying it's simple to do this, it requires you to kind of really pay a lot of attention. to your leadership and what they're saying. As Jillian just said, you have to tie everything you're doing into the company strategy and your organizational strategy. And we talk about that a lot in the book. That's a common thread that runs through the entire book. But moreover, I think with customer success's evolution and the pressures that it's under at this time, you can't escape the need to be mindful of what's happening outside of that too. So I think if you're going to be successful in business in general, it's not I hate to say this, people, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It actually requires you to kind of go beyond that boundaries and educate yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So Jeff, going back to, you at the beginning of this section of our conversation, and you said about honing in on, your sort of, I don't know if you use the word strengths, but you kind of like your superstar, kind of your niche that you discovered within your role in customer success. But how do you balance as well where, the growth mindset, or, and alluding to kind of what Peter said as well about being open-minded and especially when it comes to growing your career. So how do you balance the two of making sure you leverage the thing that you're really good at and kind of making that brand for yourself as that type of a CSM, but also growing as well?
Yeah, it's just like what's really cool. Again, I think the different distinct perspectives. Peter has a great external. He's kind of like a CS evangelist, right? And so he has a great view and great guidance on how to evangelize yourself as CSM. Just broadly in general. And I think for me, it's more like internal, like you said. But to your question, I feel like I have gotten stuck in thinking I'm good in a certain lane of CS. And then, but for me, just like career growth in any space, finding mentors to help see your blind spots, right? There's this thing, when I first started at LinkedIn, my manager, I'm going to shout her name's Linda. She did this thing I've never seen anybody do before. And she had me fill out this form that said, I want you to find a mentor, a coach, a sponsor, an advocate, and a friendtor, right? And she had this like CS dream team, this roster of people that I should have in my CS career that can help you kind of think differently, right? Because I can get stuck. When I was at Microsoft for a couple of years, I did a ton of PowerPoint creation, right? So I felt like that was my niche. I could create really great decks that were impactful. At SAP, they let me create a deck that all CS used for a certain part of our segments. And I felt like I got stuck there, and that's what I got known for. You know how in Hollywood you can get typecasted, right? I was getting typecasted in my CS role, right? And I wasn't willing to learn any new dance moves. And but finding some of these mentors, people in roles that maybe I want to aspire to. Even my manager was huge in that she knew my work, but she was also willing to like not tiptoe and walk on eggshells around me and tell me what areas I need to grow in. And so I think finding that roster of people in your, maybe not just CS, but in your life, career, whatever applies to you, super helpful in getting me to think more growth mindset versus the obviously fixed mindset for those that read the book, right? So I feel like that's been huge and unlocked. And actually, another thing is, in this last couple of years, I've been, going out to other CSMs that are in, they have like, every organization, you have CSM 1, 2, 3, 4s. I'm a CSM 4 right now, but I've been going out to like CSM 1s and 2s and trying to find out, like, what are you guys doing, right? Like, because I don't get to see that as much, and trying to learn from everybody has been, I feel like a huge unlock for me. I know this seems very common sense, but sometimes we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, and I think that was like a huge unlock for me.
I think it's common sense that's rarely exercised, frankly.
Yeah. To know and not do is to not know, right? And so I had to go out and meet some, learn from others. It's been great.
Yeah, I love that the exercise that you mentioned, Linda.
Yeah.
That's really yeah, I think that's a good one for people can take away and use that. That's really good.
Yeah.
Just have that list of people who are, and you can, I feel when you move roles or when you move positions or even just over time, it's interesting to see how that evolves. Like, I think it'd be cool to keep those and have new ones rather than, change the names on there. And that just builds your network over your career as well, and staying in touch with those people who are been helpful to you and also allies. And things turn around too. I've had there's one person in my network who, when she was brand new to the country, the city, and wanted to switch from being an engineer to a customer success manager. And so I was a mentor for her, and she's done really well in her career. And now, she's a lead of a team, and she's able to help introduce me to people in the community as well. So it's great to see how supportive people are in customer success too. So
I think Jeff should answer this question from John right now.
Oh yeah.
So I've typically, I'd say like 80-20, 80% of this is a good question, John. So 80, probably just for me personally, I mean, just maybe a proximity and comfort. I've reached out to folks in my organization because I'm looking to grow in the organization. But I feel like a lot of your career is not just what you know, but also a lot about who you know, right? And so I try to spend time working with and collaborating with people that I've worked with maybe in the past. And then, the role at LinkedIn, I try to network with people at LinkedIn to get a role there. Right? So I think that was really important too. But like, I think it's important, for the external piece to broadcast yourself is to, reach out to people in different organizations, right? Like there's some strategies to grow in the role that you're in, but then there's also strategies to, if you want to move from to different companies, which is also a fantastic strategy as well. As, I want to be the CSM that people think about when they go to a different organization that's hiring, right? I want to be the CSM they think, oh man, I had a great experience with him. He didn't have an ego. He was open to learn. He worked really hard. He was innovative, all these things. And so I try to take that, nobody's perfect, but I try to do that as often as I can. Every interaction that I have, whether it's account transitions at the fiscal year, right? We've all gone through that. Whether it's I'm collaborating on a project, I want to bring my best to that individual, partner with them so that in the future, as we all kind of spread out across the industry, you can pull in these relationships, mentor them, and really, cast a wider net. Right? So hopefully that helps, John. Great question.
Yeah, I might add to that as well. Those are two ends of the spectrum of just reaching out to someone you've never met. You like their profile on LinkedIn maybe, or whatever the reason might be, or just the company they work at is somewhere that you're interested in working at, whatever the reason. There's that end of the spectrum. And then the other end of where you know the person and you reach out. But I find a really effective way is finding people that you know in common. So if there's someone that you'd like to be introduced to, figure out, LinkedIn is set up that way so you can see who your common connections are and try to get an introduction. Introductions are the best. Yeah.
There's a technique, right? So there's this I'll name her name. I won't give too much, but her name's Bernadette, and someone in CSI I really respect her work. She's very thorough. Someone I just like does awesome work. And it's similar to dating in a way. Like I want to ask her to mentor me and coach me on certain things, but I didn't want to. She may be really busy, and I don't want to ask her and say, "Oh, well, I just got a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to feel hurt. My pride will be hurt, right?" And so I think one of the ways I've learned, I took this on a LinkedIn learning course, so check that out if you haven't heard of it. But I went to her and asked her a couple questions on things that are very strategic, right? Not just the basic stuff of CS, but things that are really strategic. We had this awesome conversation. I think you can kind of slowly, and this is just career in general, slowly step into a relationship like that without putting on them like a formal cadence, committing them to something like that. I think that's a much more smooth, frictionless way to ask somebody to be your mentor, is ask them a couple strategic questions. And eventually you can reach out to them on a more regular basis. And I've definitely taken that approach many, many times now. It's just easier than, facing my fear of rejection.
Yeah, it's true. You don't have to, someone can turn into a mentor. You don't have to formally say, will you be a mentor for me? Yeah. Actually, this was reminding me, Peter, of how we met. Do you remember? So Peter was in a webinar. Peter's done lots of webinars, and I was attending. This is a few years ago now. And somebody asked a question during the webinar, would you be all right if, what if somebody just reaches out to you and asks you to connect? And I was like, I think that, and then Peter's answer was, of course, I think most people are willing to connect. So I was like, all right then. So after the webinar, I sent Peter a message, and the rest is history. We've been,
Well, we're friends now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're collaborators now too, I would say. Can I just add one more comment on this whole mentoring idea? I'll try and keep this brief, and I think I mentioned it in the book. I don't mention his name, but to Jeff's point about reaching out to people, 22 years ago or so, I was an individual contributor. I wasn't in CS. I was in sales as a solution consultant, but I wanted to grow my career. There was an executive vice president of sales who was basically my boss's boss, who was running all of global sales for the company I was at the time. And he came to town to Toronto, and I met him. We actually went to a client together. I think I did a good job that day. I was presenting. I think he saw something. We had a conversation, and that evening, I said to him, "Hey, I'd like to stay in touch," because I saw him present before. I thought he was super sharp, really bright guy. And I said, "I'd like to stay in touch with you just to kind of bounce ideas off you, get your thoughts on what I want to do." And he said, "Absolutely. Let's set something up." Nothing about talk to your boss, none of that stuff, right? Anyways, he was amazing. He was a mentor of mine, very informal, but he would respond to me pretty quickly, pretty easily. And he never gave me an answer. He always challenged me. Every single response was a challenge. And I would joke with my wife about it. Like, why doesn't he answer the damn question? Right. But anyways, and she's smart, and she said, well, he's trying to test you. He's just trying to make you grow. And he did. And anyways, he helped me a lot in my career. We're still in touch. He's become a serial CEO of different companies, super successful guy. And so there's that. Don't be afraid if you have an intuition about someone and a senior executive who you think, I bet you this person would respond favorably to me reaching out with a suggestion that they might be able to help me. You might be surprised at their response.
That's really great. You're right. They, at least for me as an IC, some of these skip levels can be really intimidating, right? And so, but at the end of the day, speaking generally, I think most of them are really willing to help. But yeah, there's another little sneaky tactic if you guys are into sneaky tactics, especially internally at the company. One of the ways I've tried to get on the radar some of leadership, and over a few different roles, I can't remember who I learned this from, but is to have, because leadership, they like to engage with customers, right? Because it keeps them close to the front lines. It keeps them relevant to what's really happening with the customer. So they love it. They absolutely love it. And they speak about it, their opportunity to get a chance to work with a customer, or meet with a customer, or just interact, right? And so if you as a CSM can help them have these opportunities and make it frictionless, as frictionless as possible, I think you'll win with them. And one of the great ways you can do that as a very easy, low-hanging fruit lob is just like ghostwrite an email. For example, I went and did an in-person business review with a customer. It went fantastic, right? And the executive, my leadership, never been there before. or met them. And so I ghost wrote an email, like it would be coming from him, that he could send it to the customer. And he put his little voice, he put his voice on it. But then he sent it to the customer, and the customer loved it. Right. First of all, it accomplishes a lot of things. It was great for the customer because they get some visibility and access to this executive. The executive got to interact and say, see some of the good work we're doing. And obviously it's a good promotion for me as well, because now the customer's responding back, oh, Jeff is this, this, and this. I was like, oh, thanks. I try my best. Right. And then, so I think full circle, I think is a really great experience and a great way to, start build a relationship with some of those folks.
But through all those building relationships, you have to keep demonstrating competence. Because that could just damage things if you I don't want to see you're not allowed to fail. Everyone's allowed to fail, but you have to make sure that you're producing the kind of results that will enhance that connection you're having and validate for them that the time they're spending with you is good, is useful.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. It can't just be a tactic, right? There has to be substance behind it, to your point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the way that you sort of perform in the experimentation that you have is more between your direct manager, and then when you're taking the time with people who are in higher leadership positions, you want to make sure that the time is well spent. Yeah, great point. Well, are we ready to move to our final topic?
Sure.
The uncertainty in today's customer success landscape. So, Peter, I'll direct this at you first. So, from your consulting and research, that's been part of your career. What significant shifts have you observed in skill sets and roles that companies are seeking now for their customer success teams compared to a few years ago?
Sure. So, because I've been talking about automation and process improvements and digital for well over a decade, I remember presenting at a Tatango conference. I think it was 2015 or 14 or something like that. It was all about customer marketing from a customer success point of view. And the room was packed because it was such an unusual topic. So there was a lot of thirst. Now, admittedly, I was talking about something that was a bit ahead of capabilities, right? It required customer success to rethink the way it thought about technology and process and the organization itself. But I think finally things are catching up. And I don't mean to say that I'm way ahead of everybody. I just think I've always had a healthy respect for the customer. I've always grounded everything I do in the way the customer thinks and what their expectations are. And people should not dismiss the customer as wanting that they only want high touch, they want high attention. I would argue it's the opposite. Actually, most customers don't want a lot of touch. They want results. They want the product to work. Ideally, they never want to talk to you. So we should strive for that. And so I think in terms of the future, based on what's happening, I think because of the upset that's gone on in customer success over the last couple of years, the financial constraints and all the layoffs and all the questioning of the value of customer success as an organizational entity, I think we're landing on a point now where most companies realize, okay, we have to better embrace technology to reach customers, to prove that we can move the needle on producing, helping them create the outcomes that they need from our solutions. So I think that's the direction I see. And what that means is that customer success is shifting as a kind of organizational entity from being that sort of upfront, empathetic, we're one-to-one, we're all that stuff. That's not affordable anymore. Companies cannot do that beyond a very small segment of what they would consider their most valuable customers. What about the other 98% of companies that that you're not investing time in. So you have to figure out how to touch all those. And so I think companies are starting to realize that matters to them. And so we're seeing, and the most obvious manifestation of results there are the wildly popular establishment of customer success operations practices within CS. That to me is a hugely positive signal that finally customer success is going to pay very serious attention to process, to data analytics, production of insights at scale, all those things that are really hard to do, but that at the end of the day matter more than anything else, is producing those insights that you can push out to customers based on where they are in their journey. It's an aspirational goal, but I think I see a lot of companies making good progress in that direction.
Yeah, great insights. Yeah, it's important that you pointed out CS operations, even if that was some of those CS operations strategies and methodologies were being used before. It wasn't necessarily focused on as a strategy. It was always part of other strategies.
That's right.
And and I think having that as a focus, it makes the organization more efficient. And
I'm also pleased to see salespeople move into CS, and the ones that I see moving into CS have a very kind of customer friendly, obviously, but technology friendly mindset, and they're willing to exercise process. I think they inherently understand that the market needs to be touched in a broad way, and you can't do it one person at a time. So the ones I've spoken with, like the former account executives who have moved into CS, they're bringing that really good organizational skills to look at a portfolio of accounts, figure out how to strategize, what they should be focusing on, and bring it into CS, understanding that CS's mandate is the entire customer base. And so I think it's going to infuse customer success with a more professional selling talent and positioning talent for making sure the solutions are the right ones for customers going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. Interesting that you mentioned about sort of sales coming into CS. Because it's always been the skills there, but maybe we only have a couple minutes left, so we don't want to get into it too much. But that's part of some of the change too, I think, is how sales and CS are working together. I mean, maybe we can come back to that one. And I was thinking to ask you, Jeff, about the fact you're working as a CSM at LinkedIn. Are there any methodologies and frameworks that that you see that are evolving with the needs of the CS industry in your role?
Well, LinkedIn is also, although LinkedIn is this massive company and it connects a lot of CS too, because that's kind of where a lot of community is built. I think we're guilty of having our own CS practice, right? And I think what we do here could be relevant elsewhere, but not necessarily. I think I like, if you want to know the future or at least have a good idea, I think Peter is the best person to speak to about where CS is headed. But for me, I think my perspective is probably a little bit more as an IC, like an individual contributor. And like, I think, if you want to have success and you want to be recession proof, if you're not sure where CS is going, I think really investing in your brand is really going to be really important. Just like we were talking about earlier, right? Networking, finding mentorship, doing great work, right? And showcasing that great work. As a CSM, I think for me as an IC, I don't have the influence in the space as some of my counterparts do, right? And so really focusing in on how am I partnering my leadership, how am I partnering with my sales partners. I think that's a huge one that I didn't really talk about earlier. I think sometimes CS and sales we can. Sorry, I know this may be not directly answering your question, but I know
Well,
CS.
this is perfect because we wanted to come back to this topic. So
Yeah, well, I know you got a couple minutes, but CS and sales, I know sometimes we can kind of talk smack about each other behind me. You know, we'll talk about sales within the CS groups, and sales will talk about CS in their group sometimes, and positive, and sometimes little challenges here and there. I think that's a very real thing. I think the best thing, one of the best ways you can promote yourself in CS is have a strong partnership with sales. Right?
Yeah.
I know not every organization has that kind of partnership, right? But I think most do. And because if you can help them grow the business, you're going to get high visibility because you're tying your CS work to dollars of revenue. I always talk about, I feel like CS should be a revenue engine, right? It should be seen like that. We'll get the attention of leadership and the organization if we are. But I think on a personal level, right, no one's going to advocate for you more than your sales partner if you're helping them find deals, right? CS qualified leads are probably one of the highest. Not turnover, but conversion has the highest conversion rates, right? So if you can partner that way and show them that you're on their team, they're going to advocate for you and they're going to talk to their managers about you. And the sales leadership, they have some of the strongest influence in the organization. And that's one of the big ways you can get your name out there, right? I think so. If you're uncertain about the future of CS, or if you're uncertain about the macroeconomic kind of landscape, which is one of the cool things I do get to see at LinkedIn, is the macroeconomic space, because we have 1 billion members. We get to see what the trends are in the talent space, right? Then I think building your brand is crucial.
Yep.
Yeah. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So is there anything, Jeff or Peter, that you feel like that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to make sure that we share?
So I would just say to people, if you're on LinkedIn a lot in the customer success community, there's so much focus on metrics. It can feel, I think, overwhelming at times because you're constantly hearing people screaming at you about ARR and GRR and all these kind of acronyms that they're important, but they're not important to you in your individual contributor role on a day-to-day basis. Keep those things, understand those things. My recommendation is to just get better at your job. And to Jeff's point, make sure that you understand what your contributions mean. So if you're in a project, make sure you figure out how to document the results for yourself so that if you need to go to another opportunity, you'll be able to show, I was involved in these projects. This was the financial result. This is the impact on the customer. This is the impact on the company. That laundry list of projects that you're involved in goes a long way to getting to the next level of interviews that you need to go through. So again, don't get confused and overwhelmed by all the acronyms that you're being screamed at about on LinkedIn. Those matter more to your VPs than to you as a CSM.
Yeah. That's huge. That's really huge. I think what he said was paramount, right? Documenting. You have your brag book, right? They say.
Yeah.
Right. But you got to prove it. So, for me, I love CS so much because I just love what we get to do. And how unique we are in every organization. I just say, we get to touch so much, right? In a very appropriate way. we get to touch so many pieces of the business, and from leadership to product, to engineering, to marketing, to everything. We even have to do get into legal once in a while, right? And so I think taking the opportunity to, if CS is not forever for you, then it's an incredible gateway to, right? And so just taking advantage of the opportunity we have in CS, which allows us to touch so much of the business, but also, outside of your organization as well, to Peter's point. So, yeah.
Great summary. Thank you both. We're just a couple minutes from the top of the hour, so time to wrap up. And thank you, Practical CSM, for giving us this platform to have the conversation. And a few people have asked if the session is recorded. It is, and it will be available either shortly after or within by tomorrow for sure on this use the same link as you used to get here. And that's all. Is there anything I've forgotten?
Yeah, I think we want to just remind everybody, like, we, love to connect on LinkedIn, connect any way possible.
Happy to
send us a message. I think it brings, at least for me, I know it brings me a ton of energy. I know it's the same way for you guys too. And so,
thanks for investing your time in attending this webinar.
Yeah, and try and get your copy of the book. I've got the background on, so you can't see it very well, but yeah.
Appreciate it.
Can't not plug the book.
Thanks, Jillian.
Thank you, Jillian, for hosting. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you both. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye for now.